Have you ever felt like you don't quite fit in? Like there's something different about you that even you can't explain? You walk into a room and instantly feel the tension that no one else notices. You hear what others ignore. You carry a weight you didn't ask for, and sometimes you feel the pain of people you barely even know. Since childhood, maybe you've been misunderstood, mislabeled, or even mocked for being too sensitive, too intense, or too spiritual. But deep down, you've always known that this isn't just personality. This isn't just a phase. This is a call. There are people with prophetic gifts, yes, but then some were born prophets. It's not just about dreams and visions, it's about divine design. It's not something you picked up in church. It was knit into your very being before your first breath. The Bible says in Jeremiah 1:5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." That means God didn't just give you a role, He gave you an identity. He didn't just call you later in life, He marked you from the start. And that's why the warfare began early. Because the enemy sees it too. He doesn't wait for you to start walking in it. He attacks you to make sure you never do. That's why your life has felt strange. That's why you've wrestled with isolation, deep inner conflict, rejection, unusual dreams, and spiritual attacks that don't make sense. You weren't crazy. You weren't overthinking. You were born with something hell wanted to shut down. But the fact that you're still here, still pressing into God, still asking questions like this, that's the evidence. You were born to see, to speak, to shake atmospheres. You were born a prophet. In this video, we will consider 10 signs that confirm you weren't just given a gift. You were born with a mandate. These signs will give language to your journey and ignite clarity where confusion once ruled. If you've ever questioned why you're different, why you feel things so deeply, or why your life has felt like a war, you need to hear this. This is not about hype or titles. This is about identity and freedom. Before we go, hit subscribe and let's keep walking in God's light together. We are raising a generation that's not just spiritually aware, but spiritually equipped. This isn't just another video. This is a prophetic awakening. Let's carefully look at them. One sign is that you've always felt different. It was beyond the gift. You were set apart. Before you even understood the full meaning of the word prophet, something deep in your spirit knew you were marked. Not for fame, not for ease, but for fire, for the burden, for a voice that must cry out, even if it costs everything. This isn't about having a prophetic gift that occasionally kicks in during prayer. This is about something deeper, something wired into you by the hand of God Himself. You didn't stumble into the prophetic. You were born for it. From a young age, you could sense the atmosphere shift. You'd walk into a room and feel what others were carrying before they said a word. Joy, pain, bitterness, sin. You didn't know how to explain it, but it was like their souls spoke louder than their voices. You could feel it in your chest. The weight of what they weren't saying was often louder than what they were. That sensitivity wasn't you being too emotional. It was your spirit responding to invisible realities. You were born seeing without your eyes. Then there were the dreams. They weren't just strange. They were loud, vivid, urgent, sometimes terrifying, sometimes divine, often so real that you'd wake up in sweat or with tears soaking your pillow. You'd dream about people you barely knew, events that hadn't yet happened, warnings that felt like alarms sounding in your soul. And here's the thing, many of them came to pass, not because you asked for it, but because you were wired to hear from heaven while the world slept. Prophets are not entertainers. They're not glory hunters. They're not trendsetters. They are often wounded healers, misfits, and outcasts. If you've lived a life of rejection, misunderstanding, and isolation, it might not be warfare alone. It might be divine separation. God often hides prophets. Not because they're unworthy, but because the weight of their assignment demands crushing before crowning. You weren't rejected by people. You were hidden by God. There's also that unbearable restlessness when things are out of alignment with God's will. You can't just let things slide. Injustice, compromise, fake spirituality. It doesn't just irritate you, it burns in your belly like fire, shut up in your bones. You try to stay silent, but silence becomes torment. You try to ignore the prompting, but your soul won't rest until the word is released. You weren't born to be a peacekeeper. You were born to be a divine disturber. Your discernment is different. It's not just vibes or intuition. It's divine intelligence. You'll see through masks even when others are clapping. You'll feel the danger behind a charming smile. You'll sense the decay hiding under polished appearances. And sometimes it'll make you weep, because prophets don't just see evil. They feel the weight of the grief in God's heart when his people are deceived. You weren't built for shallow Christianity. You were born with a radar for heaven's agenda. And warfare, the relentless attacks that started before you even knew how to fight back. Attacks on your mind, your health, your identity, your calling. Some of you nearly didn't make it out of childhood. Others battled suicide, shame, or insanity. But now you see why hell fought you so hard, because you were dangerous before you ever opened your mouth. You were marked from birth, and Satan knew it. He tried to bury you, but God was building you. You don't crave stages, you crave obedience. You don't chase microphones, you chase his whisper. You'd rather be in the wilderness with God than in a palace without him. You'd rather weep in secret than perform in public. Because at the core of who you are is this unshakable fire. Thus saith the Lord. If all of this sounds like you, this isn't your imagination. It's confirmation. You weren't just given a prophetic gift. You were born a prophet. And no title, no rejection, no warfare, no delay can change that. You don't need anyone to validate what heaven has already written in your spirit. You are who God says you are. Another sign is that you often feel the burden of things others don't understand. Honestly, there's a kind of weight you carry that doesn't make sense to most people. It's not depression. It's not just stress. And it's not always because something is wrong in your life. It's deeper, heavier, spiritual. And the moment you try to explain it, you're met with blank stares or polite nods that say, I don't get it, but okay. If you've ever walked into a room and felt an overwhelming atmosphere shift like grief, warfare, urgency, or even joy, and no one else noticed, you need to hear this loud and clear. You weren't just given a prophetic gift. You were born a prophet. You see, prophetic gifts can be stirred, imparted, or activated by the Spirit. But when you were born a prophet, it's like your very soul was wired to perceive and feel the unseen. And because of that, your sensitivity isn't optional. It's who you are. That strange heaviness you sometimes wake up with. The reason you feel like crying for a nation you've never visited? Or why do you randomly feel intense spiritual urgency while everyone else is chilling? You're carrying burdens heaven entrusted to you. Now, here's where it gets tricky. You often feel alone in it. How do you explain to your friends that while they're enjoying the vibes, you're feeling God's heartbreak over a generation? Or that their joke didn't sit right with you, not because you're uptight, but because you picked up a spirit behind it they didn't even notice? It's lonely. You might even start second-guessing yourself. Am I too emotional? Too deep? Too intense? No, you're just wired for divine burdens. I remember seasons where I couldn't join in the laughter, even though nothing was wrong. I'd walk out of meetings and cry, not because anyone hurt me, but because I felt God's disappointment that people were talking, but not listening to him. In those moments, I didn't need a friend. I needed understanding, and that's something only God could give me. You need to know this. Burden bearing is not a weakness. It's a prophetic mark. The prophets of old were burdened people. Jeremiah was called the weeping prophet because he carried a pain that belonged to the heart of God. Ezekiel was told to lie on one side for days, literally, to carry the sin of a nation. Hosea had to marry someone who broke his heart again and again, all because his life was a prophecy. These weren't just men with prophetic gifts. They were born prophets, and their very lives became messages. So when you feel that weight, that ache in your chest, that tightness in your spirit, don't run from it. Don't drown it out with noise. Ask God, what are you showing me? What am I carrying today? Because more often than not, it's an invitation to intercession. It's a call to partner with heaven, to stand in the gap, to cry when others are laughing, to feel what no one else feels because heaven trusts you to. This kind of calling won't always get applause, it won't always be validated, but it's real. And if you're honest, you've felt this for as long as you can remember. Even as a child, you couldn't just let things go the way others did. You'd feel things deeply. You'd ask questions others didn't ask. And sometimes, you'd get overwhelmed with emotions you couldn't explain. That wasn't random. It was prophetic wiring, a call already woven into your soul. So the next time you feel a burden no one else sees, don't let it make you feel strange or broken. Let it remind you, you were born a prophet. Not just someone who has a gift, but someone who is a gift. You carry the emotions of heaven, the whispers of God, and the urgency of eternity. And even if the world doesn't understand it, remember that heaven does. That deep burden you often feel, it's not isolated, it's connected. Because many times, that weight on your heart is God's way of preparing you for something ahead. In the same way you feel what others don't, you also tend to know what others haven't seen yet. And that leads us to the next undeniable sign. You hear, see, or sense things before they happen. Have you ever known something before it happened? Like you just knew. You couldn't explain how, you just did. Sometimes it came as a thought that dropped into your spirit randomly. Other times it was a picture in your mind, or maybe even a dream that felt too real to ignore. And then later, it happened exactly as you saw, heard, or sensed it. If this has been your repeated experience, you must understand something. You weren't just given a prophetic gift. You were born a prophet. The difference matters. A prophetic gift is powerful and beautiful, but being born a prophet means your entire spiritual system was designed to pick up heaven's signals even before they fully manifest on earth. Your spirit is tuned to the frequency of the future, and God often speaks to you in advance, not just for fun, but because He has made you a watchman. It can be unsettling sometimes, especially when you're young or unaware of what's happening. You might have felt odd when your dreams started coming true, or when you would randomly say, "I just feel like this is going to happen." And it did. People may have laughed it off, or worse, told you to stop being weird. But deep inside, you knew it wasn't a coincidence. And you were right. Prophets are often presensors. You don't just react to what happens, you sense it before it shows up. Why? Because God trusts you to prepare, pray, or warn. And sometimes, just to sit with it and let it break your heart before it breaks the world's. But here's the part that can make you feel isolated. Most people don't get it. They don't feel what you feel. They don't see what you see. And they won't always believe you until it's too late. That's why many prophets go through seasons of feeling strange or second-guessing themselves. But hear this, you are not weird. You're just called. Think about Joseph. He dreamt about leadership before it ever made sense. He saw the future while still living in a pit. Or think about Samuel. As a young boy, he heard God's voice before he even understood what it meant. Even Jesus, the greatest prophet, perceived the thoughts of men and knew what was ahead before anyone spoke a word. This isn't about being spooky or mystical. It's about being sensitive. Heaven whispers, and you hear. God reveals, and your spirit catches it, sometimes long before your mind understands it. And this sensitivity is not a flaw, it's your function. Maybe you've had dreams that shook you, or a vision during prayer that lingered all day. Maybe you just knew someone was going through something without them saying a word, or you sensed danger in a place that looked perfectly fine. That's not paranoia, that's prophetic design. But here's what I want you to hear. Don't ignore it, don't downplay it, and don't let people shame you out of it, because what you carry is needed. The world doesn't just need talented speakers or flashy ministers. It needs prophets who can hear what God is saying before it becomes obvious. You might not always have the full picture. Sometimes you'll just get a piece, a feeling, a phrase, a flash. But even that piece is powerful. Your role is to listen, lean in, and steward it well. Not every revelation is for the public. Some are just to stir you into intercession. Others are seeds for future instruction. But every time God lets you in on something early, it's proof of trust. So the next time you hear it before it's said, see it before it shows, or sense it before it happens, don't doubt yourself. Smile, because it's a sign. You were born a prophet, not just someone with a gift, but someone God designed as a mouthpiece, a messenger, and a watchtower. Heaven talks to you early because it expects you to prepare others. That's not a coincidence. That's your calling. Prophets also struggle deeply with rejection and misunderstanding. It's a major sign of the anointing. When people see a prophet, they may see the fire, bold words, and miracles performed. However, they miss the pain they go through. If you've often felt rejected, overlooked, or different because of the way you perceive life, hear this. You were born a prophet, not just someone with prophetic moments or glimpses, but someone marked by heaven to carry messages that don't always make sense to those around you. And because of that, rejection has probably followed you like a shadow. Prophets are rarely understood in the moment. Even as a child, you may have noticed how people just didn't get you. Your ideas felt strange to others. Your sensitivity was called too much. You may have been excluded from groups, even when your heart was pure. You tried to love deeply, but still ended up misread. If you've ever sat in a room full of people and still felt unseen or spoken truth only to be shut down, you're not alone. Jesus was a prophet, and he too was despised and rejected of men, according to Isaiah 53:3. And if the Son of God, carrying perfect love, could be misunderstood, what makes us think we won't face the same? Rejection for prophets is not always because they are flawed. Sometimes it's because they carry something holy, something weighty that others aren't ready to receive. You're not just a person, you're a message. And messages that confront, awaken, or expose can trigger people's discomfort. But here's the hard part. It still hurts. Prophets love deeply. You don't just see God's heart, you feel it. So when people reject us, it's not just social, it's spiritual. It feels like they're rejecting the very essence of who we are. That's why rejection cuts so deep. It's not just about not being liked, it's about not being known. There were times I'd cry out to God, asking, why do I always feel out of place? I wasn't trying to be different, I just was. And no matter how much I tried to tone myself down to blend in, to be more normal, I couldn't shake the ache of always feeling like an outsider. But over time, God showed me. This wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Rejection has a way of separating you from revelation. When people distance themselves from you, it creates space for God to draw nearer. When the world pushes you out, God is pulling you in. And what feels like abandonment is often heaven's strategy to deepen your dependency, not on applause, not on acceptance, but on the one who truly knows you. Even the people you love most may not fully understand your wiring. You might constantly hear, "You're too intense," Why do you always take things so seriously? Or just chill a little. But what they don't know is you can't chill when your spirit is on fire. Be reminded, God often hides his prophets in plain sight. David was left in the field. Joseph was thrown into a pit. Elijah ran to a cave. Even Jesus was almost stoned in his hometown. Why? Because people often resist what they don't understand. So if rejection has been your reality, take heart. It's not because you're broken. It's because you're chosen. Your longing to be seen, known, and embraced is valid. But you must come to a place where your identity is not shaped by people's acceptance or their silence, but by God's calling. When you were born, heaven didn't just place a gift inside you, it placed a burden. And with that burden comes a path that not everyone will walk with you. But even in your loneliness, you're not alone. Jesus understands. The prophets of old understood, and I understand. So the next time you feel that sting of being rejected or the ache of being misunderstood, don't curse it. Let it remind you, you were born a prophet. God set you apart, not to fit in, but to speak out. And sometimes that comes with pain. But that pain is that it's part of the price for carrying something eternal. So yes, rejection and misunderstanding can be excruciating. But the weight of that rejection often mirrors the weight carried in the spirit. The world may not understand, but the spirit realm does. Because when God marks a prophet, he doesn't just mark them with pain, he marks them with sight. Let's look at the next sign. You carry heavy dreams or visions with alarming accuracy. There are moments when the things seen in dreams or visions feel too real to ignore, too specific to be coincidental. This isn't the result of imagination or an overactive mind, it's something deeper. You've seen things before they happened. You've dreamt in detail and then watched those details unfold in real life. This is not by chance. It is prophetic wiring. You don't chase visions, they come to you. You don't manufacture dreams, they arrive with force, often waking you up in the middle of the night, leaving you with questions and a pressing sense of urgency. Some dreams feel peaceful. Others feel like burdens that sit on your chest until you pray them through. But regardless of tone, the accuracy is undeniable. And that accuracy isn't meant to impress, it's meant to prepare, to warn, to guide. Carrying heaven's downloads is not a light thing. It often brings discomfort, confusion, and emotional weight. There are times you wake up and feel like you're holding something too heavy for your age or capacity. That's because what you're carrying isn't ordinary, it's prophetic. God doesn't show things to fill your mind. He shows things to fill your mouth and your prayers. He reveals to those he can trust. And when the same God who shaped galaxies decides to whisper secrets into your spirit, that means you've been chosen to steward things that matter to heaven. This isn't about being spooky or strange. It's about being spiritually sensitive, attuned to what God is saying before it becomes visible to others. That sensitivity is sacred. You may not always know what to do with what you've seen, but your spirit does what your flesh cannot. It feels the urgency, it knows the weight, and it begins to move into intercession even before your mind catches up. Some dreams are symbolic, others are literal. Some are for now, others are for later. Some are personal, others are national. But each time heaven speaks, the responsibility grows. Sometimes there is no one to talk to about what you've seen, no space to explain the weight of it. But this is part of the life of a prophet. There are moments when visions are not meant to be shared, only carried. Dreams are not meant to be posted, only prayed. God often tests prophets in private before trusting them in public. If your journals are filled with dreams that have unfolded over the years, or if you've often been the person to say, "I knew this was going to happen," don't dismiss it. That level of accuracy is not natural, it's supernatural. It's evidence that heaven is communicating. The dreams are not random. The visions are not fabricated. The accuracy is not by mistake. You are God's mouthpiece. And prophets are often trained through repeated encounters that sharpen their sight and deepen their discernment. God doesn't just want you to see. He wants you to understand what to do with what you see. That takes maturity, and that maturity starts in the secret place. So write the vision, pray it through, guard what you've been shown, stay humble, even as the patterns continue. The more obedient you are with one instruction, the clearer the next one will be. And when the next vision comes, remember, this is not pressure, it's purpose. You're not just someone with dreams, you are a vessel of revelation. Another thing you might notice that points to you being a prophet is that while others are busy with the crowd, your spirit longs for the quiet. You are drawn to deep prayer and isolation, even if you fight it. There's a pull that never quite goes away, a drawing, a stirring, a quiet voice that keeps calling you away from everything else into the secret place. Even when it's hard to explain, you've always felt it. You may have tried to blend in, to stay busy, to do what everyone else is doing, but something keeps tugging at your heart. You feel it strongest in loud places, in long conversations, or even when you're surrounded by people. The desire to just get away and be with God rises again. And no, it's not because you're antisocial. It's because you're prophetic. God often trains prophets in hidden places. He speaks most clearly in stillness. And even if you haven't always known what to do when you are alone, your spirit has always known that something important happens there. It's not about having perfect words. It's not about praying for hours without pause. Sometimes it's just sitting in silence, or crying when no one sees, or whispering, "God, I'm here," even when your heart feels dry. That's what prophets are drawn to. That's where prophets are shaped. Even Jesus, the greatest prophet of all, often withdrew to lonely places to pray, according to Luke 5:16. With crowds pressing in, miracles flowing, and needs surrounding him, he still slipped away to be alone with the Father. If the Son of God needed solitude to stay aligned, how much more those he has called to speak for him? And many times, the season of isolation comes before you're ready. It can feel unfair, uncomfortable, confusing. Why the distance from people? Why the sudden change in friendships? Why the loneliness? But the truth is, it's not just loneliness, it's separation. Heaven is calling you deeper, not to punish you, but to prepare you. Because before a prophet can carry the word of the Lord, that prophet must know his voice. And that knowing doesn't come in the crowd. It comes in the quiet. Over time, you'll notice that your spirit becomes sensitive to prayer. You'll feel the burden to pray out of nowhere. You'll find yourself weeping over things you can't explain. You'll lose interest in surface conversations because your heart is always reaching for more. Yes, the flesh may fight it. Prayer feels heavy at times. Being alone feels hard. But even when you drift, that drawing comes back. That pull never fully lets go. Because you're not called to live in noise. You're called to move by spirit. That's why Jeremiah, a prophet marked from the womb, often found himself alone with God, weeping and speaking words no one wanted to hear. He said, "I sat alone because your hand was on me." That kind of solitude isn't rejection, it's divine selection. That's why some friendships don't last. That's why you're often misunderstood. That's why there's a quiet ache in your soul that nothing else can satisfy. Not parties, not attention, not even ministry. Because what you're hungry for is Him. That hunger for deep prayer, for quiet spaces, for God's voice. It's part of your blueprint. And though it can feel lonely, it's in those quiet places that the oil flows. It's in the secret place that burdens lift. Those strategies are revealed. that your voice is shaped. And here's the beauty. Once you start yielding to that pull, the presence of God becomes your favorite place. Not out of duty, but out of desire. Because there's nothing like being with the one who called you even before you knew his name. So if you've always been the one who pulls away, if you've always felt the need to be alone, if deep prayer has called you even in your weakness, know this. It's not a random feeling. It's a prophetic signal. The secret place is not what you do randomly. For a prophet, it's survival. You weren't born to just speak for God. You were born to walk with him. And that walk begins in the quiet, over and over again. Have you ever noticed that people love to share their burden? It may be a sign that you are a prophet. Prophets are wired to feel burdened. They are empathetic. They see beyond the natural into the deepest heart of people. So it's easy for them to feel the pain of people. Maybe you have noticed people always wanting to be around you and see it as a blessing, not a heavy chore to do. One of the clearest signs that someone was born a prophet is that people tell you things they didn't plan to say. Not small talk, not surface-level words, but deep, hidden things. Their pain, their past, their guilt, their temptations, even strangers, even people you have just met. It's not something you ask for. It's not because of anything you say or do. You're not fishing for secrets or trying to sound wise. Many times, you're not even trying to have that kind of conversation. But something in your presence opens people up. Something in your spirit disarms the walls they've built around their heart. This is not about being a great counselor or having a warm personality. It's not about skill or training. It's something spiritual, a pull, a quiet force that draws people to share the parts of themselves they've hidden from everyone else, and they don't even know why. It's like walking through life with a light on. Not the kind that shines on your face, but the kind that shines into others. People sense that light, and without even understanding why, they respond to it. They confess, they cry, they open their mouths, and their hearts follow. Prophets carry burdens, not just for people, but for families, cities, nations, systems, atmospheres, movements. And often, before God lets you speak to those large-scale assignments, He trains you with individuals. He teaches you how to hear pain in the voice of a broken mother, how to sense bitterness in the laughter of a wounded leader, how to read the tears behind someone's forced smile. He makes you a vessel that can feel His grief over His people and still love them without judgment. This is why you sometimes find yourself weeping over situations you can't explain, a city you've never been to, a culture you don't fully understand, a church you've never entered. And yet the burden comes, the heaviness sits on your chest, the tears fall, and in that moment, the Spirit of God is training your heart to feel what He feels, to see what He sees, to carry what others refuse to notice. This is not emotionalism. It is intercession. It is a divine partnership. Paul said in Romans 9:2, "I have great sorrow and unceasing anguish in my heart for His people." That wasn't poetic exaggeration, it was prophetic pain, the kind that wakes you up at night and doesn't let you go until you've prayed it through. And this is what it feels like to be born a prophet, to live with a heart that never fully lets go, because it's been tied to heaven's agenda. And heaven's agenda is people, not just crowds, souls, stories, destinies. And here's the mystery of it all. Many times, the people pouring their souls out to you don't know why they're doing it. They'll even say things like, "I've never told anyone this before," or "I don't know why I'm telling you this." And you don't either. You weren't trying to counsel them. You weren't fishing for their pain. But something in your spirit pulled something out of theirs, without asking, without force, without effort. It just happened. That's not manipulation. That's not psychology. That's the Spirit of God. He's bearing witness through you. Your spirit becomes a conduit, a mirror, a window, a safe room. And they come running because something in their brokenness recognizes the healing oil in your life. A born prophet doesn't just hear secrets, they carry them. Over time, it becomes a familiar pattern. Someone pulls you aside, sometimes with tears in their eyes. Sometimes they pause and say, "I've never told anyone this before." And then the floodgates open. This can happen anywhere, during a short conversation, in a crowded place, or even while doing something completely ordinary. And when it happens, it's often intense, heavy, a moment filled with raw honesty that leaves you holding something sacred and painful. Why does this happen? Because your life carries a weight that others feel, even when you're silent. There's something about your presence that feels safe, clean, without judgment. It calls people to the truth without saying a word. And that's the prophetic nature at work. It's not just about seeing visions or speaking messages. It's about creating space for truth to rise to the surface. Your very life becomes a mirror where others suddenly see what they've been trying to hide. This constant stream of confession is more than just emotional moments. It's insight. It's a revelation. God uses it to show you what's going on beneath the surface of people, families, churches, and even entire systems. Through their words, you begin to hear what the Spirit is saying. The hidden sin, the silent cry, the spiritual sickness. But this gift can also feel like a burden, because when someone pours out their pain, they don't just leave it behind, they hand it to you. And now, you're carrying pieces of a broken story that won't leave your spirit alone. You pray, you weep, you wrestle. And sometimes you hear clearly what God wants you to do next, whether it's intercede, speak, warn, or simply listen. A person with a spiritual gift may be used this way sometimes. But for someone born with a prophetic call, it happens over and over again. It follows you, it finds you, even when you don't feel ready, even when you're tired, even when you wish someone else could carry it this time. This is how God shows you hearts. It's how He trains your ears to listen beyond words. And over time, it humbles you. Because hearing the worst of people doesn't make you proud, it breaks you. It reminds you that everyone is fighting something, that no one is as perfect as they look. So when people keep coming, telling you things they swore they'd never say, don't push it away, don't ignore it, recognize it. This is one of the clearest signs that you weren't just given a gift. You were born with a mantle, a divine responsibility. You carry the truth, and people can feel it even before they know why. You weren't just born to be eloquent, you were born to be available. This is why silence is sacred to you. It's where you release what was never yours to carry. It's where God enlarges your heart to carry nations like names and systems like suns. And though it's weighty, there's joy. There's joy in knowing you are partnering with God for things bigger than you. There's joy in knowing that your tears have an assignment. Your empathy is not wasted. Your intercession is not emotional but eternal. So don't resent the weight. Don't suppress the tears. Don't second-guess the way your heart breaks for things that others laugh at. It's not a flaw, it's a signal. As a prophet, you will be uncomfortable with injustice. If you see people going through tough times and you find yourself interceding on their behalf, it's a sign. There's a kind of pain that settles into your spirit when things that are clearly wrong are treated like nothing. It's not just sadness or anger, it's a deep spiritual burden. It doesn't leave quickly. It presses on your chest and pulls at your soul. When others brush it off, laugh it away, or look the other way, you can't. You never could. That's not weakness. That's not being too sensitive. That's a mark of a prophet. From a young age, this weight was always there. When someone was mistreated, your stomach twisted. When a lie was told and everyone went silent, your insides screamed. When people with power ignored the weak, something holy rose up in you, even if you had no words for it yet. You were the child who couldn't look away, the teenager who spoke up when others stayed quiet, the one who asked, "Why is no one doing anything about this?" Not because you wanted attention, but because your spirit was disturbed by what others accepted. This is not just a personality trait. It's not just being empathetic. It's not even just being justice-minded. It's a spiritual sensitivity placed in you by God Himself. Prophets are often the first to feel what's wrong, even before the evidence shows. That's why it stings so much when others don't seem to care. Your tears feel lonely. Your voice feels unheard. But that ache, that pain, is proof that you are carrying God's heartbeat for justice. Scripture makes this clear. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God? This is not a suggestion. It's a requirement, a demand from heaven. And those who were born prophets feel it burning in their bones. That desire for justice doesn't just touch your thoughts, it consumes you. Because prophets don't just believe in justice. They are called to announce, protect, and live it, even when it costs them everything. Sometimes this deep burden can feel isolating. People may say you're too intense, or that you make things too deep. They might even accuse you of overreacting, but they don't carry what you carry. They don't see what you see. There are moments you've cried in private over things no one else noticed. You've lost sleep over wrongs others laughed at. And even when you try to walk away or stay quiet, that burning sense of, "This is not right," wouldn't let you go. That is the prophet's portion, to feel deeply, to see clearly, to be troubled by silence, to carry heaven's weight over what earth treats lightly. Jesus, the great prophet, did not turn away from injustice. He flipped tables. He wept over cities. He defended the forgotten. And if His Spirit is alive in you, which it is, you'll carry that same holy fire. It may not always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just the quiet ache in your spirit that refuses to die. The inner cry that says, "This must change." Sometimes you find yourself waking up with someone else's pain in your heart. You can't shake the face of the person who broke down in front of you. Their story plays in your mind like a loop, not out of worry, but out of calling, because you know you weren't just meant to hear, you were meant to carry, to pray, to discern what God is doing underneath the words. And sometimes you hear heaven's whisper, "Speak this." Other times, say nothing, just pray. And both are obedience. And when that ache becomes prayer, and that prayer becomes obedience, the prophetic mantle begins to move. You're not just bothered, you're being stirred by heaven. The flesh will often grow tired of this. You'll be tempted to shut yourself off, to say, "I just want a normal life," to wish you could walk into a room and not feel everything, to sit through a conversation without spiritually hearing behind every word. But prophets don't get that luxury. You were born sensitive, born spiritually porous, born with ears that pick up more than what's said. It's not a curse, it's a calling. And the moment you start seeing it that way, it changes everything. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 5:14, "The love of Christ compels us." That word compel means to press, to constrain, to arrest. That's what divine burden does. It compels you. You don't love because it's convenient. You love because something stronger than you has gripped you, and you pray, not out of obligation, but out of holy unrest. Because until you release what you carry, you can't breathe right. This sign matters because it shows the kind of prophet you are becoming. Not just one who speaks, but one who stands. One who sees what others ignore and still chooses to care. One who will not call wrong right, no matter the cost. One who would rather be rejected for truth than accepted for silence. You are not broken. You are burdened. And that burden is holy. You are not weak. You are marked. And that mark is from God. So if you've been carrying burdens that don't make sense, if people keep finding you, telling you stories they swore they'd take to the grave, if you often feel overwhelmed with emotions that aren't even yours, if certain nations, cities, or names drop into your heart like a flood, if you cry over things no one else notices, this is not random. This is not weakness. This is your training. This is why Paul says in Galatians 6:2, "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." You are fulfilling something divine every time you carry someone in prayer, every time you weep for a soul, every time you stay up to pray for a region you've never visited. This is what prophets do. They carry the unseen. They labor with God in secret. And often, they never get credit. But heaven sees it all. Another sign that you are born a prophet is that your life doesn't fit into the world's mold. You can't be kept in a box. You are always uncomfortable following trends. There's a spark in you telling you that you are made to stand out. You've tried, believe me, you've tried. You've copied the rhythms of others, mimicked their habits, tried their methods, sat where they sit, served how they serve, but still, it never feels right. Not because of pride, not because of rebellion, but because the oil in your life demands a different path. You were born to be set apart. From childhood, you noticed it. Noticed how the things that seemed to thrill others bored you. How the games they played didn't catch your interest. How the rules they followed never quite made sense to your spirit. You weren't trying to be different. You just were. You didn't understand it then. You couldn't explain the ache inside you, the deep sense that you didn't quite belong anywhere. But now you're starting to see it wasn't rejection. It was consecration. Prophets are marked, not just in adulthood when the call becomes visible, but from the womb. The hand of God rests upon them before they take their first breath, and heaven begins shaping their life according to a pattern not drawn by human hands. It means you'll often feel the tension of being in the crowd, but not of it. Surrounded, but still separate. Involved, but always observing. Even when you laugh with others, your spirit is quietly scanning. Even when you join the song, something deeper in you is listening for another sound. This sign, the inability to blend in, is one of the most consistent markers of a life born for the prophetic. Not because you're better, but because you've been given ears that hear a different frequency. And that difference has consequences. People misunderstand you. They label you deep, intense, and too serious. They wonder why you ask such piercing questions, why you see 10 layers deeper when they're content with the surface. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to resent this difference. You'll try to shut it off, try to laugh louder, talk more, be normal, but it never works. Why? Because you're not wired for normal. You're wired for sensitivity. Sensitivity not just to emotion, but to atmosphere, to unspoken things, to spiritual currents, to the sighs of God that ripple through a room when everyone else is distracted. You walk into a place and you know something's off before anyone says a word. You feel the weight no one mentions. You discern the spiritual climate before people begin to speak. That's not paranoia, that's perception, that's prophetic design, and this sensitivity affects every part of your life. It changes the way you hear sermons. What pierces someone else inspires you, but what passes over them breaks you. A single phrase can become your prayer for days. A small moment in worship becomes an altar for you. You see, prophets don't just hear, they absorb. They don't just listen, they digest, meditate, wrestle. That's why when a real word from God comes, it doesn't just inspire you, it marks you, it disrupts you, it becomes part of your inner architecture. Paul spoke of this in Galatians when he said, "When it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me by his grace, to reveal his Son in me." That word, separated, is the same idea. Set apart. Not later, not when mature, but from the womb. And with that separation comes a divine shaping. You learn obedience through the things you suffer. You learn to trust through the betrayals that nearly crushed you. You learn discernment through seasons of isolation. And each layer is part of heaven's blueprint to form the prophet. Not in public first, but in private, in pain, in silence. That's why your life has never followed the smooth script others seem to enjoy. Your detours were not accidents. Your delays were not denials. They were chiseling tools in the hands of God. Every missed opportunity, every closed door, every unexplained silence was God cutting away distractions, carving out capacity, deepening your roots, because a shallow prophet is a dangerous thing. But a deep one, a broken one, a trained one. That's a voice hell fears. And it's not just the shaping, it's the stripping. The prophet's life is often marked by what is taken as much as what is given. Friendships that vanish, dreams that die, seasons where nothing seems to grow. You watch others rise while you're still hidden. You see doors open for people with less oil, less depth, less hunger, and the temptation to compare creeps in. But you must remember, you're not running their race. Your dealings are not common. Your call is not casual. You've been enlisted into something eternal, and eternity doesn't rush. This slowness, this divine pacing, is often mistaken for failure. People question you. Family wonders what you're doing. Even you question God sometimes. But underneath the silence, heaven is still writing, still weaving, still proving your spirit trustworthy for what's coming. Because prophets are not microwaved, they're marinated. They're not launched by popularity, they're released by weight. And weight takes time. So yes, you may feel like a misfit, like you live on the edge of things, like your life has never been easy to explain. But could it be that the discomfort is a confirmation? That the ache you carry is holy? That the longing for more, the constant sense of "this isn't it," is God himself pulling you deeper? Because prophets are made to dwell in the tension of being human yet hearing divine, of feeling pain yet speaking hope, of knowing secrets yet bearing them in silence, of weeping over a people who laugh at your warnings. And to carry all that requires solitude, requires oddness, requires separation, not as punishment, but as preparation. So if your life has been marked by disconnection, if you've felt like a spiritual orphan, if you've tried to fit, but something in you always cries out for more, know this: you're not broken, you're not rebellious, you're not too much. You're called, you're marked, you're in training. And though the shaping hurts, though the stripping confuses, though the silence seems unending, the day will come when your voice carries not just words, but weight, when your words pierce the atmosphere, when your prayers unlock regions, when your obedience shifts generations, because you were never meant to blend in. You were born to stand out, not for fame, but for fire, not for the spotlight, but for substance, not for performance, but for presence. So, embrace the strangeness, welcome the wait, yield to the process, because the more you surrender, the more the mantle settles. And when that mantle fits, hell trembles, heaven smiles, and the earth hears the sound of one who was truly born a prophet. And that is why you never quite belonged. Because you were never just born, you were sent. All these are signs of your prophetic wiring. There are moments in the life of a prophet when silence speaks louder than any sermon, when what is not said in public echoes louder in heaven than what is shouted in the courts of men. And often, God trains his prophets not by their access to platforms, but by their access to pain. Deep pain. Pain that rewires your prayers and bends your will. Pain that brings you to the altar with no words, only groans. You see, prophets don't just carry words, they carry wounds. To be born a prophet is to be born with a spiritual target on your life. Before you even know how to pray, the war begins. It comes for your mind, your voice, your identity, and your confidence. From childhood, the enemy tries to distort what God has deposited. He surrounds you with chaos to mute your clarity. He bombards you with rejection so you question your authority. He distracts you with noise so you forget the whisper. Because he knows if this one ever awakens fully, if this one ever sees rightly, hears clearly, and speaks boldly, regions will shake, chains will break, cycles will shatter, and heaven's agenda will advance. So what does he do? He counterattacks early. He launches betrayal after betrayal, isolates you through misunderstanding, plants false mentors, sends counterfeit confirmations, and tempts you to give up your birthright for approval. He doesn't mind you being gifted. He fears you being consecrated. Because once consecrated, your voice is no longer for sale. Once consecrated, your eyes no longer lust after platforms. Once consecrated, your yes becomes dangerous. And in this crucible of becoming, God will seem silent, not because he has abandoned you, but because he's building you. Every delay is a lesson. Every rejection is a redirection. Every unanswered question is an invitation to deeper trust. And though you want answers, what God gives you instead is alignment. He anchors you in his spirit. He tears down every false identity. He burns away every ambition that does not serve your assignment. He unearths motives. He exposes idols, until what remains is a vessel empty enough to carry fire. Because prophets aren't known by how much they speak, but by how deeply they've died. Died to applause, died to ambition, died to comfort, died to control. Until all that flows from their mouth is what burns on the altar of heaven. And that kind of voice, that kind of vessel, is forged, not found. So when your life feels like it's unraveling, don't run. When doors close without explanation, don't panic. When old systems no longer satisfy, don't settle. You are being provoked into destiny. You are being pulled out of the common into the consecrated. This is not rejection. This is refinement. This is not exile. This is elevation in disguise. And soon, you'll find that the very wilderness that broke you is now the womb where God trusts you with his secrets. Because prophets are not tourists of pain, they are stewards of it. They mine revelation out of suffering. They extract glory out of ashes. And when they speak, it's not just information, it's impartation. Their words don't tickle, they tear. They don't flatter, they free. That's why your life could never be like theirs. That's why your journey never followed the map. That's why the road has been narrow and the companions few. Because prophets don't just walk to be seen, they walk to be sent. And you have been marked for more than crowds, more than gifts, more than even ministry. You've been marked to host God, to host his voice, his weight, his fire. And for that to happen, the pruning must be precise. The training must be intense, because what you carry is not light, and who you are becoming is not ordinary. So rise. Stand in your difference. Embrace your distinction. You are not random. You are not late. You are not forsaken. You are born a prophet. And the world is waiting to hear the sound of your surrender. Heaven put a watchman spirit inside of you, and no matter how much you try to live like others, that assignment keeps calling. It's not something you can pray away. It's not something you can trade for comfort. Because when God births a prophet, He doesn't just give them a voice. He gives them a burden. This is why you cry over sin, why you feel things that others dismiss as insignificant, why you wrestle in prayer over things that don't affect you personally. You weren't designed to walk blindly through life. You were designed to carry heaven's concern. This is not an easy path, because carrying heaven's burden will sometimes feel like madness. You'll question your own sanity when you sense storms in the spirit and no one else sees clouds. You'll feel pressure in your soul when there's no obvious reason for it. You'll pray with groanings that can't be explained, and later find out someone was at the edge of life and death. Why? Because prophets are intercessors by design. They don't just preach, they stand in the gap. The pain you carry in prayer is not always your own, and that's the mystery. That's the weight. That's the prophetic edge that cannot be taught in seminars or conferred by human hands. It's a mystery, a divine implant, a sensitivity that breaks you down and rebuilds you in the image of Christ. And sometimes, in the breaking, you feel like you're drowning in emotion you can't explain, but you keep showing up. Why? Because your spirit is loyal to a kingdom assignment that your soul is still catching up with. And you've tried to shake it, haven't you? Tried to pretend you're normal. Tried to laugh it off. Tried to let the world tell you who you are. But it never sticks. Because your spirit remembers what your flesh tries to forget. That before the foundations of the earth, you were set apart. What others call moodiness is often spiritual agitation. You're catching what they ignore. You're discerning what they excuse. And if you don't recognize this as part of your prophetic design, you'll start to believe you're flawed. You'll suppress your sensitivity. But that's dangerous. Because when a prophet ignores their burden, they lose their clarity. Don't confuse heaviness with depression. Don't confuse solitude with loneliness. Sometimes what you call strange is actually sacred. Sometimes the tears you cry in secret are not for your pain, but for someone else's breakthrough. And the more you yield, the more He trusts you. With His voice, with His heart, with His grief. That's the part many don't understand. Prophets don't just carry messages, they carry grief. The grief of God, the ache of a father who longs to restore, the pain of a savior who was rejected, the longing of the spirit who is quenched day after day by a distracted church. And when you carry that grief, it changes how you speak. You don't prophesy from anger, you prophesy from tears. That's why you tremble. That's why you hesitate before you speak. Because real prophets don't enjoy rebuke, they weep over it. They don't love exposure, they intercede for mercy first. You've felt that, haven't you? That wrestle between justice and grace, that pull between saying what's hard and waiting for the heart to be soft enough to receive it. That's not weakness, that's maturity. That's Christ being formed in you. And let me say this clearly. If you don't learn how to carry this burden in the spirit, it will crush you in the flesh. Because prophetic people burn bright, but they also burn out fast if they don't learn to rest. The weight of intercession is holy, but it must be balanced by abiding. You must learn to drink deeply from the presence of God, not just for ministry, but for survival. Because when the weight increases, the only place you'll find breath again is in the secret place. And the secret place will become your home. Not just a location, but a lifestyle. Not just a discipline, but a dependency. Because prophets don't draw power from crowds, they draw it from communion. If you don't know how to get along with God, you'll start seeking people for what only His presence can give. And that is dangerous. Because prophetic people are vulnerable to spiritual burnout when they stop beholding and start performing. Remember, your first call is not to a platform. It's to a person. Your identity is not in your insight, it's in your intimacy. Before you are called to speak for Him, you are called to be with Him. And when that is in order, the weight becomes bearable. The tears become worship. The burden becomes intercession. And your life becomes oil that heaven can trust. Do you remember the moments when you tried to run? When you convinced yourself you were imagining it all? When you silenced your own mouth just to avoid being misunderstood again? You tried to do what everyone else was doing. You tried to enjoy what others loved. But every time you stepped into someone else's lane, something grieved in your spirit. You couldn't fake peace because the path was not designed for you. Another sign you are a prophet is that it becomes difficult to copy others. Prophets do not thrive in imitation. You can admire others, you can learn, but you cannot tailor your life after theirs. Your path was hand-carved, your life has been crafted by the Spirit, setbacks and all. That's why your detours still produced depth. That's why your failures didn't disqualify you. They humbled you. They kept you dependent. Because prophets don't carry the word of the Lord out of perfection, they carry it out of surrender. And surrender doesn't mean flawless. It means yielded. It means that when you fall toward God. When you break open to Him. When you run, you always find yourself running back. Why? Because there's nowhere else to go. Deep in your spirit, you know, this is not just about ministry. This is not about a career. This is about a covenant. You've tasted eternity. You've glimpsed the throne. You've felt the nearness of God in your belly, and nothing else satisfies. Even your failures were part of your formation. God allowed them not to shame you, but to anchor you. Because there's a kind of grace that only flows through broken vessels. There's a kind of oil that only comes from being crushed and still saying, "Yes, Lord." Your failures didn't cancel your call, they baptized it. Because now your voice won't just carry truth, it will carry mercy. Prophets must bleed to carry healing. They must weep to carry joy. They must wrestle to carry peace. That's why your life has been so unusual. It's not a punishment, it's a preparation. Because what you will carry is not small. And God does not entrust fire to those who won't honor the furnace. So don't resent the process. Don't despise the pain. Don't curse the seasons of silence. Every delay was designed. Every no was necessary. Every locked door was protection. Because while you thought nothing was happening, God was building you in secret. He was testing your motives, purging your ambition, shaping your compassion. Not because He was far, but because He was near. Closer than your breath, watching, weighing, waiting for your yes to become more than words. You have become what you were born to be. You are not perfect, but purified. Not loud, but weighty. Maybe not popular, but prophetic. And now you'll speak not just to ears, but to hearts. Not just to people, but to powers. You'll walk into atmospheres and shift them with your silence. You'll pray prayers that bend timelines. You'll hear strategies in dreams and receive downloads in stillness. You'll be sent into systems not to survive them, but to shake them. Because prophets don't just preach, they build, they tear down, they reform, they reveal. And all of that begins not with charisma, but with consecration. You have paid a price in tears, in isolation, in obscurity. But hear me, heaven remembers every seed, every yes, every sacrifice, every time you obeyed when no one was watching. You've passed the test of silence. You've passed the test of slander. You've passed the test of the wilderness. And now you stand not in your own strength, but in the mantle you were born to wear. So walk boldly, speak faithfully, burn endlessly, because you are not what the world calls you. You are not what failure whispered. You are not what fear predicted. You are what God ordained. A voice, a trumpet, a prophet, born, not just gifted. And this identity does not come from the applause of men. but from the whisper of the throne. It was never about performance, never about perfection. It was always about proximity. God drew you close so he could mark you. Not with titles, not with platforms, but with his own hand. You are sealed, not by oil in a bottle, but by fire in your bones. And now, that fire is ready to be released. What other sign shows God has ordained you a prophet? You've always had this strange sense that what's happening around you is never the full story. Even when people are talking, even when life is moving, there's this pull in your chest. This spiritual alertness never turns off. It's not anxiety. It's not paranoia. It's something deeper. It's your prophetic wiring at work. A knowing, an intuition that runs beneath the surface of your thoughts. And for most of your life, you've wondered if others feel it too. Some do, sometimes, but for you, it's constant. What you're feeling is a mark, a prophetic imprint on your perception. Because prophets don't just speak, they see. They don't just receive words, they receive patterns, they discern motives, they sense assignments, they see through smiles and hear through noise. And that's why this sign matters. You don't just notice what's said, you catch what's hidden. It's like walking through life with invisible lenses that others don't have. You walk into a room and sense the tension that hasn't been spoken. You meet someone, and within moments, you're catching fragments of their soul, sadness, pride, confusion, pain, and you weren't even trying. This isn't about suspicion, it's about sensitivity. Your spirit is wired to detect what the natural eye misses. You feel atmospheres, you pick up the unseen. Not because you're trying, but because you were born to. You don't just hear people's words, you hear their spirit. You know when someone's words don't match their internal world. You hear flattery and feel flinch. You hear confidence but feel insecurity. You hear encouragement but detect manipulation. And you wrestle, because it's hard to explain that what you feel is more accurate than what you see. You second guess it. You try to silence it. You wonder, am I being judgmental? But every time you ignore it, you regret it because your spirit was right again. This is discernment, not suspicion, not fear. Discernment. A spiritual tool so sharp, so alive in the prophetic spirit, that it often activates before your mind has had time to catch up. You discern places, you discern people, you discern spirits. And here's the sign. You've felt uncomfortable in rooms that everyone else enjoyed. You've had your stomach turned during conversations that seemed light and friendly. You've had moments where something felt off, and days, weeks, or even years later, the truth finally came out. This ability to sense what others miss is not optional for prophets. It's essential because prophets must deal in truth, not surface, not personality, not performance. Truth. And that means God often bypasses your five senses to feed you insight in the spirit. Not so you can gossip, not so you can control, but so you can intercede, so you can speak what others are afraid to say, so you can see what hell is trying to keep hidden. And that's why this sign comes with weight. Because once you begin to discern in the spirit, you are no longer safe to just be entertained by everything. You can't laugh with compromise. You can't sit in polluted atmospheres without something grieving inside of you. You'll find yourself withdrawing from circles where you once felt welcome, not because you're better, but because you've become more aware. That awareness is holy. It's uncomfortable, but it's part of your calling. You don't have the luxury of being blind. You don't have the ease of being naive. And that's not a punishment, it's a preparation. Because when you discern, you see what's forming, not just what's visible. You hear conversations beneath conversations. You feel motives without being told. And when God sharpens this, you'll even begin to discern the times, the seasons, the coming shifts. Not because someone taught you, but because the spirit inside you doesn't sleep. There have been moments when you've told people, "I just feel like something's about to happen," and they laughed it off. But it happened. You sensed something was wrong with someone, and then the truth surfaced. You felt a delay, a danger, a deception, and later it was confirmed. That's not being dramatic, that's being prophetic. And the more you walk with God, the more you'll learn how to steward that discernment with humility and precision. But this also comes with a temptation: pride. When you're constantly right in the Spirit, you'll be tempted to trust your senses more than the Spirit. Don't. Stay low. Stay teachable, because discernment without intimacy becomes suspicion. And prophets who lose intimacy lose authority. You must be trained not just in perception, but in love. Because what good is seeing if you don't weep over what you see? This is the real test of this sign. Can you see into someone's darkness and still intercede for their restoration? Can you detect someone's manipulation and still ask God for mercy on their soul? Can you discern the demonic and not be impressed by it, but moved with holy anger to tear it down? That's when discernment becomes prophetic fire. That's when your sight becomes safe in God's hands, and over time, it grows. Your perception sharpens. You'll be sitting in worship, and God will open your eyes to a spirit of perversion in the room, not to judge, but to confront it in the Spirit. You'll be walking through a neighborhood, and your spirit will groan because of the darkness buried in its foundation. You'll be in a casual meeting, and the Holy Ghost will begin to download blueprints that the people in the room don't even know they need. Prophets pick up on demonic strategies woven into policies, organizations, cities, and churches. And once your discernment begins to touch systems, your voice will no longer be welcome in places that are married to compromise. That's how you'll know your discernment is maturing, when your silence makes people nervous and your words expose what people tried to hide. This is why you often feel pressure you can't explain. The Spirit is stretching your senses, teaching you to trust His whisper more than the crowd's noise. And this sensitivity, though exhausting at times, is your weapon. It's how you'll see the ambush before it strikes. It's how you'll identify the root before it grows. It's how you'll protect those who think they're fine, but are living surrounded by vipers. And the enemy knows it. That's why he's tried to attack your perception. That's why he's tried to make you second-guess yourself. That's why he's tried to overwhelm your senses with fear, lust, anxiety, or confusion. Because if he can dull your discernment, he can mute your mantle. But not anymore. Now your eyes are opening. Now your ears are awakening. Now your spirit is catching frequencies heaven has reserved for those who walk closely. You're not unstable. You're a seer in formation. And this gift is no accident. This is the mark of one who wasn't just given a gift, but one who was born a prophet. And when you begin to fully walk in this kind of discernment, you'll start to notice something else. The enemy starts to fear you before you even speak. People feel the weight of your presence, and they don't even know why. Some will be drawn to you, others will not like you. You're not doing anything obvious, but your presence comes with authority. There are prophets who prophesy from pain. There are prophets who prophesy from pride. But God is raising a breed who prophesy from the presence, from proximity, from trembling, from the kind of discernment that sees through the smile and finds the tear, through the applause and hear the silence, through the noise and still catches the whisper of God in the back of the room. You've been trained for this, and you're still being trained, because discernment is not just about catching evil, it's about recognizing timing. Some things you'll see, but not speak. Some things you'll discern, but not move on, because prophets don't just speak truth, they must release it in God's timing. This is where many fall short. They see correctly, but speak prematurely. Or they wait too long and the moment passes. But when discernment is mature, it becomes governed by wisdom. And wisdom teaches you that some insights are for prayer, not public words. That's why the secret place remains your classroom. Not social media, not conferences. The secret place, where God teaches you when to release and when to weep, when to speak and when to stay silent. Because silence can be more prophetic than a sermon when it's charged with heaven. And let's go deeper, because many prophetic people stop here. They stop at discernment and confuse it with judgment. But judgment puffs up. Discernment bows low. Judgment says, I see your sin. Discernment says, I see your chains and I'm weeping for your freedom. If your discernment doesn't move you to intercession, then it's not prophetic. It's flesh pretending to be spiritual. But for those born as prophets, discernment becomes your native tongue. You breathe it, you live it, and the more you submit it to God, the more dangerous you become to the kingdom of darkness. This is why your childhood was filled with moments of confusion and spiritual agitation. Why you often felt out of place. Why you could sense the tension in your home even before anything was said. Why certain people made you uncomfortable and you didn't know why until years later. It wasn't immaturity, it wasn't oversensitivity, it was training. The Spirit was schooling you in silence. And now the whispers are turning into words. The instincts are becoming strategies. The inner knowing is becoming outward clarity. And the more you yield, the more you see. Not for entertainment, not for self-glory, but for the building up of the body and the tearing down of strongholds. This is what discernment looks like in those born as prophets. It's relentless, it's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable, but it's holy. And if you carry this sign, know this, it is not random, it is divine. You are not just sensitive, you are set apart. You are a watchman, intercessor, and revealer of hidden things. You were born to see what others overlook, not to judge, but to awaken. Not to condemn, but to call forth. Not to destroy, but to build. You were born a prophet, and the world will never be the same once your eyes have opened fully. Now, let's look at the final sign. Your voice doesn't belong to you. It's not just that you have something to say, it's that what you say carries something. Even from a young age, people listened when you spoke, not because you had the best vocabulary or perfect ideas, but because there was a weight on your words. You'd say something simple and it would hit people like thunder. You'd make a comment and they'd pause, think, remember, because what left your mouth didn't sound like borrowed noise, it sounded like revelation. Prophets are not just born to hear, they are born to declare, to pronounce, to release. And whether you've realized it or not, there's always been a push on your tongue, a fire behind your sentences, a holy urgency in your voice, even when you were shy, even when you were uncertain, even when you tried to be silent, the enemy knew it. That's why your voice was attacked early. That's why you struggled to speak up. That's why people tried to silence you. That's why fear gripped your throat when you stood in front of others. Why you felt like choking in rooms where you were supposed to share what God gave you. Because hell is terrified of what comes out of your mouth when it's surrendered to heaven. So it tried to shame you. It tried to make you feel disqualified. It tried to tie your identity to your past, your flaws, your insecurities, all so you'd keep your mouth shut. But even in silence, the fire stayed. Even when you said, I'm done, the words stirred again. Because you can't bury a mantle, you can't kill a calling. When God plants fire in your bones, silence becomes torment. That's why Jeremiah said, His word was in my heart, like a burning fire shut up in my bones. I was weary of holding it in. Indeed, I could not. Have you felt that? that internal pressure, that ache to speak what no one else will say, to cry out when others are sleeping, to declare truth in rooms where deception has become normal. That's not personality. That's not frustration. That's heaven pushing you out of hiding. That's your call colliding with your voice. You don't just have a voice, you are a voice. That's what makes this final sign different. It's not just about having a gift of prophecy. It's about becoming a vessel, a mouthpiece, where God's words don't just pass through you, they take root in you. They possess you. They break you before they bless others. That's why prophets often weep before they speak. That's why your strongest words come from your deepest wrestles. Because your voice is not a performance, it's a birthing. Every time you speak, something is released. That's why people remember your words. That's why your voice carries weight. Because God didn't just give you words, He gave you a spiritual sound. And that sound carries a breakthrough. It carries a warning. It carries wisdom. It carries mercy. It carries the fear of the Lord. And it doesn't always come out pretty. Sometimes it sounds strange, raw, urgent, and emotional. And you've doubted yourself because of it. You've said, "Why can't I be more polished? Why can't I be smoother? Why does it always sound like I'm trembling?" But hear this, that trembling is your anointing. It's what separates you from the performers and the parrots. It's what marks you as authentic. Because you don't speak to impress, you speak to deliver. That's why your voice is not just for pulpits. It's for living rooms, sidewalks, boardrooms, street corners, group chats. Your voice was made to invade places where people have forgotten how to hear God. And when you open your mouth, the atmosphere shifts. The air thickens. People pause. Spirits stir. Demons panic. Heaven leans in. Because when a born prophet speaks, eternity touches time. Even in conversations that seem casual, God starts dropping keys. Even when you're joking, there's a line that comes out of your mouth that hits someone's soul like lightning. That's the oil. That's the flow. You weren't trained in it, you were born in it. You're not just someone who says spiritual things. You are a spiritual gate, a carrier of divine messages, an oracle for a generation that has grown deaf. And that means you can't speak like everyone else. You can't treat your words as toys. You can't throw opinions around like confetti. Because the moment you were born, heaven marked your tongue. Your words must be seasoned with weight, with truth, with spirit, with fire, with scripture. Because you're not speaking your mind, you're echoing the mind of Christ. And that requires consecration. You can't let bitterness poison your mouth. You can't let gossip rent space in your throat. You can't let flattery be your second language. You were called to speak for God, not for culture, social media following, or for clout. That's why God has been dealing with your mouth in this season. That's why you felt the urge to repent for things you said. That's why He's convicting you even about casual words. He's not punishing you, He's refining you, because the next time you speak, heaven is going to back it. And when that happens, chains will break, souls will tremble, leaders will be corrected, captives will be freed. Not because you yelled, not because you quoted someone popular, but because you carried His voice in purity. This is why it's so dangerous for you to stay silent, because your silence is not neutral, it's disobedience. When you withhold the word, people miss what God wanted to do through you. Yes, timing matters. Yes, delivery matters. But at the end of the day, obedience is what heaven is watching for. Will you speak when it's inconvenient? Will you declare the word even when it costs you reputation? Will you open your mouth even when your knees are shaking? If you've ever felt like your mouth was born for more than small talk, then know this. You were not given a gift to prophesy. You were born with a voice crying in the wilderness, a voice that breaks the delay, a voice that exposes deception, a voice that releases heaven. And when you yield fully to that identity, when you let the Spirit take full ownership of your words, you'll step into your mantle with fire. You didn't stumble across this message by accident. You didn't scroll into this word randomly. The Spirit of God has been tracking you in your wrestle, in your confusion, in your hunger, in your questions. And He brought you here to remind you, you weren't just given a gift. You were born with a mandate. Every sign we've walked through, it wasn't a checklist. It was a confirmation, a prophetic echo of things you've known deep inside but never had the words for. The loneliness, the dreams, the hunger, the unusual attacks, the strange patterns, the weight of your words, the unexplainable discernment, the strange magnetism, the spiritual depth you couldn't turn off, the tears you cried that no one understood, the hunger for the secret place, the fire in your voice. These were not accidents, they were evidence. Evidence that before you were formed in your mother's womb, God knew you. Before you ever prophesied one word, before you ever laid hands on anyone, before anyone affirmed your gift, you were ordained. You were set apart, not for popularity, not for stage, not even for a ministry brand, but for God's heart. You were born to walk with Him, to burn for Him, to hear from Him, and yes, to speak for Him. But listen closely. With this calling comes a responsibility. Being born a prophet does not mean you automatically walk into it. It must be yielded to. It must be stewarded. It must be sanctified. The same fire that marks you can destroy you if you try to use it outside of intimacy. The same perception that makes you powerful can make you prideful if it's not rooted in the fear of the Lord. You must choose the way of consecration. You must embrace the cross. You must drink the cup because the mantle you carry isn't light. It's weighty. It's holy. It will cost you everything: comfort, approval, normalcy, reputation. But in return, you'll gain access to secrets. You'll be trusted with burdens. You'll walk in realms most never touch. This isn't a calling to just prophesy events. It's a call to be God's friend. It's a call to live close enough to Him that when He weeps, you feel it. When He moves, you move. When He's grieved, you tremble. When He speaks, you roar. Some of you are feeling it now. That holy fire stirring again. That ache, that brokenness, that sense that something sacred is happening inside you. Let it break you. Let it undo you. Let it remind you. You don't need a microphone to be a prophet. You need fire on the altar of your heart. Heaven is looking for friends. Earth is crying for truth. And prophets are God's answer to both. So now you must decide. Will you surrender fully? Will you stop running? Will you embrace the call even if no one ever claps for you? Will you be faithful to the secret place when no one sees you? Will you carry the word even when it breaks you first? Because you were born for this, not just to minister, not just to operate in the gift, but to live in the mantle. You are not a copy. You are not a trend. You are not another influencer. You are a voice, a watchman, a friend of God. So rise, weep if you must, tremble if you must, crawl if you have to. But don't ignore the fire. Don't abort the assignment. Don't trade your oil for applause, because the world doesn't need another entertainer. It needs a prophet, and you were born one. Let the fire fall. And now, if you're still watching, still trembling, still stirred, it means one thing: the Spirit is not done with you yet. This isn't just content. This is a mirror, a call, a summoning. You didn't stumble into teaching, you stepped into a reintroduction. God has been waiting to reintroduce you to yourself. Not the version people tried to reduce, not the version religion tried to domesticate, but the real you, the prophet He saw when you were still in seed form. The one marked by fire, the one born in a different rhythm. the one who carried strange burdens even as a child, the one who saw things before they happened and didn't know why, the one who has been under spiritual attack, not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous to darkness. Yes, you, the one who's fought through confusion, the one who's asked, "Why me?" more times than you can count, the one who sat in rooms where you felt invisible, but your spirit was alive, the one who's felt both unqualified and unrelentingly called at the same time. That wrestling inside you is not rebellion, it's recognition. You recognize there's more. You've always known. You were never going to be content with surface-level living. You've tried. You've tried to settle down, to dim it down, to shut it down. But the flame refused to die because you were not designed for normal. You were designed for weight. You were born for glory. You were called to carry heaven's burden in your bones. So now, what do? You surrender again. Not casually, not for show, but with the broken, burning, raw yes that heaven has been waiting to hear from you. Not a temporary yes, not an emotional yes, but a covenant yes. The kind that walks through fire, the kind that breaks your schedule, the kind that costs you your comfort, your clique, your image, your convenience. Because make no mistake, the mantle you carry is not cheap. This is not the time for you to mimic other people's ministries. This is not the hour to ride trends and water down truth for likes and applause. You were not born to fit in. You were not born to echo. You were born to pierce. And to do that, you must live differently. You must build a secret place that is stronger than your stage. You must fall in love with hiddenness. You must be more hungry for God's whisper than man's affirmation. You must let the Spirit rewire how you see success, favor, and fruitfulness. For prophets, fruit is not measured in platforms, it's measured in obedience. Are you still willing to say what others won't? Are you willing to carry what others can't? Are you willing to walk alone if it means walking with God? Because here's the truth. Being born a prophet doesn't mean you'll always feel powerful. It means you'll often feel burdened, and that burden will keep driving you back to the altar, over and over again, not out of fear, not out of religion, but because that's where the oil flows. That's where your strength is renewed. That's where the voice is shaped. You were born to live at the edge of heaven's heart, to carry its ache, to release its sound. And the world is starving for that sound. Nations are waiting, generations are waiting, heaven is waiting, and you are God's answer. So don't hide anymore, don't delay anymore, don't wait for perfect conditions, don't wait for public validation. Rise up in the Spirit, step into your posture, rebuild your altar, consecrate your tongue, guard your heart, stay broken, stay burning, stay obedient. Because you weren't born to impress, you were born to intercede. You weren't born to entertain, you were born to equip. You weren't born to blend in, you were born to break through. You weren't born to be liked, you were born to be lit with the fire of the Most High. So here is the word of the Lord to you, prophet of God. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. So now, you stand at a threshold, not of information, but of activation. This is the moment where what you've read either becomes a memory or a movement. Because when God marks someone as a prophet from the womb, the moment of recognition is not for applause. It's for alignment. It's for warfare. It's for the birthing of divine instructions that cannot be delayed any longer. Now that you know, what should you do after recognizing you were born a prophet? Recognizing the signs of being a born prophet is not the final step. It's the beginning of a journey that requires clarity, direction, and obedience. It's not enough to say, "This is who I am." You must ask, "What must I now do with this call?" Knowing the signs doesn't activate the call. Responding to God's process does. This is for those who have seen the patterns, felt the weight, and heard the whisper, "You were born a prophet." Now, what happens next? The first assignment after prophetic recognition is not to start a ministry, open a platform, or even begin prophesying publicly. The first call is to surrender. Prophets are not freelancers for God. They are bond servants. There must be a deliberate act of submission where your life, your desires, and even your understanding of ministry are laid down at the feet of the one who called you. It's easy to become eager to speak, to express what you've always felt, to validate the years of pain and confusion by stepping out. But heaven is looking for surrender, not performance. Before a prophet is a voice, they are a vessel, and that vessel must be emptied of ambition, pride, and assumption. Romans 12:1 says, "Present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service." There is a temptation to think that because you are called to speak for God, your next step is to find an audience. But prophets do not find their identity in who listens to them. They find it in who speaks to them. Start by knowing God's voice, not just his message. Know his tone, his silence, his rebuke, and his rhythms. Learn how he corrects you, how he teaches you, how he leads you through stillness. Spend days, even seasons, asking God not what to say, but how to hear. Your strength as a prophet is not in your words, it is in your ear. If the enemy attacks prophets early, it is because their early years matter. But if God hides prophets early, it is because their formation is sacred. Just like Samuel was trained in the temple before he became the voice of God to a nation, you must let God train you in silence. Do not despise hiddenness. Do not force exposure. Let your roots grow deep. Many prophets became disqualified not because they didn't have the calling, but because they forced the crown without surviving the cave. Psalm 103:7 says, "He made his ways known to Moses, his acts to the children of Israel." God reveals his acts to crowds, but he teaches his ways to prophets. That learning takes time and quiet. Your call is spiritual before it is ever public. That means your power, insight, and protection flow from the presence of God. A born prophet who does not pray is like a soldier without weapons. There must be a structure to your prayer life, not just emotion. Yes, your spirit will often be stirred spontaneously, but discipline matters more than impulse. Make time daily for deep communion. Track your spiritual rhythms. Guard your hours. Your authority in the prophetic is often determined by your consistency in private prayer. Being born a prophet doesn't mean you know everything. It means you are wired to learn differently. Spend intentional time studying the prophets in Scripture: Jeremiah, Elijah, Deborah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, and even John the Baptist. Observe their posture, their language, their fears, and their obedience. Also, learn from sound, seasoned prophets who walk in integrity today. Don't just chase excitement. Learn the difference between accuracy and character. Let their journeys remind you that you are not strange, you are chosen, and your wiring has biblical roots. Because prophets often endure deep rejection, there's a temptation to grow bitter or competitive. Don't let your past pain define your present posture. Some prophets fall into the trap of using their gift as a defense mechanism, prophesying harshly because they were hurt deeply. But the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus, not the venting of personal wounds. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life." You must regularly forgive. You must clean your heart often. Don't compare your development to others. Don't chase affirmation. Guard your heart. A bitter prophet may still speak truth, but that truth can become toxic if it flows from a contaminated well. Prophets don't outgrow submission. You may carry sight, but sight without submission is dangerous. Find a pastor, leader, or mentor who honors your gift but shapes your character. Don't just surround yourself with fans or people who are amazed by your accuracy. You need someone who can correct you, who can say, "Not yet," when you feel ready, who can discern when your soul is loud and your spirit is quiet. Submission is not control, it's safety. Even Elijah had to pass through the ministry of Elisha, and Elisha had to stay close until the mantle dropped. Being prophetic does not mean being opinionated. You must let the written word shape your prophetic words. Scripture is the foundation of your accuracy and safety. Every prophetic person must become a student of the word. Colossians 3:16 says, "Let the message of Christ dwell among you richly, as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts." Let your prophecies reflect Scripture, not personality. Let your language be soaked in the heart of God, not just your emotions. A born prophet must let the word become their sword and their mirror. Prophetic people can become extreme if they are not grounded. You must build habits that help you function as a whole person. Rest, relationships, work, health, and joy. The prophetic does not cancel your humanity, it trains it. Take care of your body. Build strong friendships. Serve quietly in your local church. Live a full life. Why? Because prophetic weight can crush you if you don't have balance. Prophets are not aliens. They are humans who carry a divine call. Once you say yes to the prophetic life, warfare intensifies. But don't be afraid. Be ready. The enemy will try to confuse your identity, distract your focus, and attack your purity. Don't be shocked by spiritual battles. They are part of the preparation. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, 3-4 says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds." Learn to war with worship, the word, and wise community. Don't carry the weight alone. Warfare doesn't mean something is wrong. It often means something is rising. You may feel the fire now, but God is still forming your foundation. Don't rush the process. Prophetic maturity doesn't happen in 1 year. God works in seasons, and each one has a reason. There will be times of fire, silence, rebuke, clarity, breakthrough, and even confusion. But each layer builds depth. Some days you will see clearly, other days you'll be forced to wait. Trust the process. Every true prophet has been through a wilderness. Those who skip it may start quickly, but they rarely last. You were born a prophet, but the world does not need another title. It needs function. Don't spend your energy proving your calling. Focus on fulfilling your purpose. You don't need business cards or hashtags. You need fruit. You need obedience. Let your life do the speaking. Whether the world calls you prophet or not, heaven already knows your name. Don't be addicted to validation. Be anchored in the assignment. Prophets are not just delivery people. They are carriers of God's emotions. Don't just release words. Carry the heart behind them. Ask God, "How do you feel about this person or situation?" Speak from compassion, not coldness. Even correction, when truly prophetic, comes wrapped in God's desire for restoration. Ephesians 4:15 says, "Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is, Christ." The goal is not just to be right, it's to be redemptive. You don't win by exposing people. You win by pointing them back to the one who heals and restores. Never forget, prophets are watchmen, not executioners. God will begin to speak more as you listen more. Don't lose his whispers. Record your dreams, your visions, the words you receive in prayer, and the things you're sensing. Build a prophetic journal, not just of revelations, but of lessons, corrections, and confirmations. Look at Habakkuk 2:2. Then the Lord replied, "Write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it." Writing helps you track patterns. You'll notice how God trains you in layers. And when warfare hits or doubt creeps in, you'll have proof that God really called you. Your journal becomes your memorial. Many prophets crave insight, but few ask for wisdom. Revelation without wisdom is dangerous. You can see something accurately and still mishandle it. You can know what God is saying and still damage what God is doing. Proverbs chapter 4:7 says, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom. And in all you're getting, get understanding." Ask God for wisdom, when to speak, how to speak, whether to speak. Ask for wisdom to know when a word is for private intercession and when it's for public release. Ask for wisdom in choosing relationships, platforms, and boundaries. Wisdom will keep you where revelation alone cannot. You were born a prophet, not just gifted for moments, but designed for a lifetime of walking with God. This journey won't always be easy, and it certainly won't always be clear. But if you stay close to the one who called you, you will never walk alone. The signs may have confirmed your identity, but your response will determine your destiny. Now that you know who you are, the question is, what will you do with what you've been given? The world doesn't need louder prophets. It needs surrendered ones. The signs weren't shared to flatter your ego. They were spoken to summon your obedience. Heaven is not recruiting prophets for decoration. Heaven is sending them into systems, cities, and structures that have been overtaken by darkness and compromise. The Spirit of God is searching the earth, not for charisma, but for consecration. Not for noise, but for depth. Not for speed, but for weight. And that's you. You are not reading this randomly. You are not lingering here by mistake. You are still here because deep is calling unto deep. The womb of your spirit has been kicking while reading. Something ancient has awakened. You feel it. You know it. You've wept through these paragraphs. You've seen yourself in every line. You've remembered who you are. And now you must respond. Don't wait for another prophecy. Don't delay until tomorrow. Don't silence what God is roaring in you right now. Now, lift your hands where you are. Lift your voice if you can. Bare your heart before God. Let the fire consume everything that's not of Him. Let the weight of this call settle fully upon you, and let every resistance melt in His presence. Say this from your spirit. Father, I yield myself to your call. I say yes again. I say yes, not out of excitement, but from a place of understanding. I say yes, not because it's easy, but because you are worthy. I won't run from the fire that purifies me. I won't hide from the weight that shapes me. I won't negotiate with compromise. I surrender fully, completely, and again. I was born to walk with you, to carry your voice, and to make you known. Let this be more than a declaration. Let it be the posture of my life. Let every step I take echo with obedience. Let every breath I breathe declare your goodness. Let my walk not be loud in noise, but rich in power. And if the journey gets tiring, help me to keep walking. Even when my strength fails, let your strength carry me. When the road gets lonely and I can't see the end, remind me that you walk beside me. Even when I feel like giving up, let your voice whisper again, keep going. Even if tears fill my eyes, help me to respond to those prophetic nudges. Even when the burden is heavy and misunderstood, give me the courage to stay yielded. Let the sound of your spirit be louder than the voices of doubt and fear. Even if no one understands, I will still obey. Obedience is my language of love. Even if I walk alone, I walk with you. Make me deaf to applause and immune to rejection. Anchor me in your will. Let my life be a vessel. Let my voice be a trumpet to the nations. Purge me of selfish ambition. Rid me of distractions. Let my life speak, even when my words are few. Make me an echo of heaven, a reflection of your heart. Use me to heal the broken, to awaken the weary, to call the lost home. That your glory alone be seen, that your name alone be known, that your kingdom alone be built. Not mine, not another's, yours alone. Refine my heart, Lord. Purify my motives. Burn away the pride, the fear, the secret things that no one sees but you. Shine your light into every corner of my soul. Strip away the layers until what's left looks like you. Let holiness not be a costume, but my very nature, because I've been with you. Teach me to wait on you, to trust in your timing. When doors stay shut, teach me to worship. When answers are delayed, teach me to rest. When the crowd walks ahead, teach me to linger at your feet. I don't want speed, I want alignment. And when you speak, let me not delay. Let your whispers find my spirit ready. Let your instructions meet an obedient heart. Let every act of obedience become another altar where your presence rests. Raise me as a standard. Mark me as yours. Not for fame, not for platforms, but for your pleasure. Let the oil on my life not be wasted on stage performances, but poured out in quiet, consistent obedience. Let the world know I walked with you, because my life could not be explained any other way. Let my life prepare the way for others to find you. Let my yes create paths for those who are afraid to say theirs. Let my story ignite courage in the fearful. Let my scars carry healing. Let my testimony become a prophecy for someone else's breakthrough. And when all is said and done, let me be found faithful. Not popular, not impressive, not decorated, but faithful. A servant you can trust, a vessel you can use, a voice that still trembles at your word. Take everything, break every box, tear down every idol, build your altar in me. Let my days on earth be spent carrying your will, not my dreams. May your spirit rest on me, not for a moment, but for a lifetime. And when you look for a prophet, let me be found ready. When you look for a messenger, let me be found willing. When you look for a son, let me be found surrendered. Yes, Lord. Yes to the wait. Yes to the fire. Yes to the call. In Jesus' name, amen. Now breathe. You are not who you used to be. A shift has taken place. Something has been sealed. You may still look the same on the outside, but in the spirit, you have been mantled. You have crossed into a new place. The dreams are going to intensify. The burdens will increase. The warfare might get stronger, but so will your clarity. So will your authority. So will your anointing. You are not walking out of this moment like a consumer. You are walking out like a commissioned one, marked, sent, and confirmed. And you will never be the same again. You are a prophet, not just because you can prophesy, but because you are the prophecy someone else has been waiting for. You are the voice that's going to wake up sleeping churches. You are the one whose words will break cycles in families. You are the one whose consecration will convict regions. You are the one whose shadow will shift atmospheres. You are the one whose intercession will birth moves of God. You were born for this. Born to say what no one else will say. Born to carry the ache of heaven into places that have forgotten how to tremble. Born to walk with God in a world that walks away from Him. So now, walk. Walk in the boldness of the Spirit. Walk in the holiness of your calling. Walk in the humility of one who knows they are nothing without His hand. Walk like fire. Speak like thunder. And remember this for the rest of your days. You were not made for applause. You were not built for platforms. You were not born for compromise. You were born for His presence. You were born a prophet. Let every chain break. Let every false identity fall off. Let every hidden gift rise. Let the prophets of God come forth. Let the sound of consecrated voices be heard again in this generation. And let the glory of the Lord rise upon you. This is the hour. This is your moment. Now go and prophesy.